Hey there, in today's video we are going to learn about how to show certain types of output to the user, because when you take input from the user needs to see something out of your application. So in today's video we will see how to let the user download some files, let the user see some sort of text or JSON response and more things like that. So let's dive right into it. So we will start with first creating a branch for our code. Hit checkout the user. Okay, so we are on our respective branch, and let's do one thing. We are going to write our code here in our index.js file. So let's start with the simplest of things. We have already seen rest.send, which is used to send some text output to the user and then close the connection. We have already seen that. So we are going to see other methods as well. Apart from send, we have also seen end, which simply just closes the connection as soon as it encounters rest.end. So let's see that. app.get close connection, and simply write function rest and rest.end and then nothing. So this uses Node.js's core, or you can say native HTTP servers end mechanism to close the connection. It will not produce any sort of output for the end user, but it will simply close the connection. So let's run our server, npm run dev, and open up our browser. Go to localhost 8000 and close on, and you will not get to see anything. But if you open up the network tab and reload this page, you will see that the connection actually got closed with a 200 response, which means that the connection was closed normally. It was not an abrupt closing of the connection. Okay, so this way you can end the connection. If you want to send some data to the user before closing the connection, you can do a rest.write hello. Okay, so this will first of all write things to the open connection, and then when it encounters this rest.end, it will close the connection. Similarly, you can send multiple lines of code, multiple packets over the open connection using rest.write, and again restart the server, reload the page, and hello hi. Okay, so this way you can send data. Now let's see some other methods. So in case you want to send some JSON response, okay, so instead of writing this rest and write, you can write something like, let me first of all copy paste this method, and let's create an endpoint called JSON, and here you write rest.json, and then just give it a plain JavaScript object. Let's do something like name and total. Okay, again restart the server and see by typing in the endpoint we have created, that is JSON, and here we have gotten the JSON response. Okay, if you head over to the networks tab and click on this request, you will see that the response headers will show you that the content type of your response was application JSON. So if you want to send some JSON data to the end user, you can do that using JSON. This JSON thing also sets certain headers in the response, and one of which was content type and content length, which was necessary for the end service or the end user to understand that, okay, whatever I have gotten was a JSON response. Okay, let's move on to other things. If you want to set some header in the response, like as we have seen that it already set some headers for us, but if you want to set some custom header, you can also do that using the response object. Let's see. So copy paste this thing one more time and change the name to header, and over here you can do something like rest.set, and then the name of your header, let's call it x custom header. Okay, so this is just a random name, you can call it whatever, and let's write something like power, or just do code. Okay, this way it will first set the header and then send the response. Now it can be a JSON response, it can be a normal response, or it can be a XML response, whatever it may be, but it will just simply set the header. Okay, let's reload the server, and instead of JSON, now we are going to write header. And if you go over here, you will see inside the response headers tab, you will see that X custom header. This is the header which we have set. So in case you want to send some arbitrary data to the end user in the headers, you can do that using rest.set. Apart from that, there may be cases where you want to send the status of the request as well. Like you were not able to process the request, or you encountered some error, or you could not authorize the user to proceed further, for that we use HTTP statuses like 200, 404 and 429 and things like that, right? So in case we want to set or we want to send the status code, we can do that using the status code command or the status command. Let's see how to do that. Copy this thing again and create a new endpoint status. Now do not return a response, just do response.status and the status is going to be 404, which means not found, and then just simply end the connection, which means that we are telling the end user, okay, you have requested the status endpoint, but we do not have this status endpoint with us and we cannot proceed further, so we are just returning a 404 response. So do that, reload your server, go to status, and you will get to see this sort of thing. And if you head over to the networks tab, you will see that status was a 404 response, which means not found. So the intent behind returning this sort of status is there so that the end user or the end consumer can identify what sort of response it has gotten, because generally in the web development land, a 200 response, which means a status code of 200, reflects that the request was processed successfully by the server and whatever I have gotten is a valid response from a server. But in case the server wants to reflect a state which is an error state or a state which reflects that the server was not able to process the data, then we have other status code as well, like 404, 4401 and things like that, right? So you can leverage those sort of statuses in order to show or reflect that whether your servers were able to process the user input or not. So there might be some cases where you want to redirect your user from one endpoint to other endpoint, like whenever the user is trying to log in, and if the login credentials are good, you want to redirect the user from login to the main application page, right? You can do that using rest.redirect. Let's see. So let's suppose I have an endpoint login, okay, and for the time being, let's assume that the login is always successful, whatever the case may be, okay, and we simply want to redirect the user to the app page. How can we do that? So rest.redirect and then to the JSON page, okay, which means that whenever the user requests this route, he will be redirected to this particular route. So Express will issue a 302 redirection, which is the default way of redirecting things in the server land. So let's see that, and let's go to login and we are redirected. And as you can see in the network tab that our request was redirected and it was a 302 found. Okay, so you can get to see that it is a 302 found redirection, and then after redirecting, the request went to this endpoint and it was processed normally, and since JSON was already there as an endpoint, we got the respective response back from the server. So this way you can redirect from the server side. Now let's come to sending files to the end user. So in order to send a file, you first of all need to have a file on your server. So let's create a simple file. Here create a file called index.html, and inside this file we can write a simple HTML file, hello express. Okay, so this is a simple HTML file which we want to send to the end user. So we can do that using the REST object app.get, and then we can create a new endpoint, send file, and then again callback function accepts rec and rest, and then rest.send file, which is yet another function for us to use. Now here you have to specify the absolute path to the file. Okay, you cannot just give the relative path, you have to specify the absolute path. So in order to do that, we can use something like path utility from Node. So scroll to the top and here just require path, constant path, and require. This is a Node API. You do not have to install it separately, and come down to our callback method and then do path.resolve and then write the name of your file, index.html. So this path.resolve will create an absolute path for your file. Okay, and let's restart the server and do something like calling the endpoint, send file, and here we have gotten the file if you head over to the network step, you will get to see that the content type was HTML. Okay, so basically it has done some heavy lifting for you as well, that it detected the file type of the file which you actually sent to the end user. So since this was an HTML file, it already set the content length and content type by reading the header of the file, right? So since it was an HTML file, we got text/HTML here. If it was some other file, it will set the content type accordingly. So this way you can send files to the end user. And since it was an HTML file, it got processed by the browser as well, and it was shown to the end user as a proper web page. So in case you want to create some really basic web pages, this can be an approach, but this is not a recommended approach. In my later videos, we will see how to use a templating engine in order to create proper views in Express. Okay, but if you want to keep it really lean, this is one such way. Okay, now this is a way to send a file, but what if you want to allow our user to download something? So for that we have yet another method called res.attachment. Okay, let's see how to do that. Copy this thing and paste it here. Now instead of doing send file, do attachment and call it send attachment. Okay, again the signature of res attachment and res dot send file are kind of similar. Okay, now let's go to send attachment. Okay, so you also have to end the response, then it will end properly. As of now it is loading. So in order to terminate the connection, we have to use this res.end as well. So reload the server and go to send attachment, and now you can see that the browser has prompted us for a download and the file has been downloaded. So this way you can send some downloads to your user as well. So there is one more method called res.download, which you can also use alternatively. So it is up to you what you want to use, because there is not a big difference between the two approaches as far as I can recall, because I did some research and I was not able to find a legitimate difference between these two things. So you can either use res.attachment or res.download. Okay. Also, when you do res.attachment, it will also set a particular response header called content disposition. So here it will set content disposition as attachment, and also it will attach the file name to it. So this is one thing you can keep in mind. Now, apart from that, we have already seen that we can redirect our users when they are logged in, but there are certain other things which we generally do in that scenario, and one such case is setting cookies so as to identify the user. Now, in order to set the cookie using the res method, you can simply do, let's first of all copy something. Okay, so let's copy this method and write here set cookie. Okay, so what we are going to do in this method is that we are simply going to end the connection without sending any sort of data to the end user, but we will set a cookie. So res.cookie will do the trick for us. So you have to provide a cookie name. So let's call it demo, and the value of that cookie is going to be demo cookie. Okay. Let's simply reload the server and go to set cookie. Now before you hit enter, you should go to the applications tab and inside the storage thing or the cookie thing, and you will see that we do not have a cookie set for this particular localhost 8000 server, right? We do not have any cookie, but as soon as we call this endpoint, we can see it cannot find set cookie. So I think we have not saved the file. Let's reload the thing. Okay, since we are returning 404, we copied a wrong response. So do not do status 404. You can either do status 200 or just leave it out so as to default it to 200 status code. Okay, my bad. I simply overlooked it. Now go to this endpoint and you will notice, if you head over to the applications tab again, you will see that the cookie has been set for us. Now, since we can set cookies using Express, we can also remove cookies or delete cookies using Express. So in order to remove a certain cookie, you can do something like, let's create another endpoint and do clear cookie and do something like clear cookie and demo. Here you do not have to provide the value, and restart the server. Now, as soon as we hit this clear cookie endpoint, this cookie will be wiped or will be cleared. So do that clear cookie, and our cookie has been cleared from our browser. So these were some methods using which you can return all sorts of data and responses to the end user. In the next video, we are going to have a look at the middleware and what we can do using middlewares in Express. So before I leave, I have a humble request that you should really give this video a thumbs up. That will motivate me to produce more such stuff, and also subscribe to this channel so that I can get more eyeballs to this channel, because I have been toiling around for a really long time without hitting it big. So high time for me to do that. I'll see you around in the next video.